Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are looking at one of the most intense and uncertain political moments in Eastern Europe, the idea of an army revolution against Alexander Lukashenko, and whether Belarus is truly on the brink of a historic turning point. This is not just a story about politics, it is a story about power, fear, loyalty, and a society that has been under pressure for decades. Belarus has long been known as Europe's last dictatorship, a country where power has remained in the hands of one man since the mid-1990s. Alexander Lukashenko built his rule on strict control, strong security forces, and a narrative of stability. For many years that system appeared unshakable, but beneath the surface, frustration and resentment have continued to grow. The idea of an army revolution is especially powerful because the military has traditionally been seen as one of the strongest pillars of Lukashenko's rule. Unlike street protests, which can be crushed by police and riot units, a split inside the armed forces would represent a far more serious threat to the regime. That is why even rumors of dissatisfaction within the army are taken so seriously. To understand why such a scenario is even being discussed, we need to look at the long history of repression in Belarus. Elections have been widely criticized as neither free nor fair, opposition leaders have been jailed or forced into exile, and independent media has been systematically silenced. Over time, this has created a society where fear dominates public life, but anger quietly builds in private. The 2020 presidential election was a major turning point. When Lukashenko claimed a landslide victory, millions of Belarusians believed the result was fraudulent. Massive protests erupted across the country, with people from all walks of life demanding change. For weeks, the streets of Minsk and other cities were filled with demonstrators, something previously unimaginable. At that time, the loyalty of the security forces became the deciding factor. Police units, special forces, and internal troops largely remained loyal to Lukashenko, using violence to suppress protests. The army itself stayed mostly in the background, but its presence was always implied, acting as a final warning to the population. Although the protests were eventually crushed, they left a deep scar on Belarusian society. Thousands were detained, many were tortured, and countless citizens lost their jobs for expressing dissent. This did not erase opposition feelings, it simply pushed them underground, where they continue to grow. Within the military, soldiers and officers are not isolated from society. They have families, friends, and personal experiences of the same economic hardships and political repression as everyone else. Over time, this creates internal contradictions, especially when soldiers are ordered to act against their own people. Reports and leaks over the past few years have suggested that morale inside the Belarusian army is not as solid as the government would like to portray. Low salaries, outdated equipment, and limited career prospects have frustrated many service members. While this does not automatically lead to rebellion, it weakens blind loyalty. The situation became even more complex after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Belarus allowed its territory to be used by Russian forces, effectively making it a co-participant in the conflict. This decision placed enormous pressure on the Belarusian military and society, as many Belarusians opposed involvement in the war. For the army, this created a moral dilemma. Fighting alongside Russia could mean participating in a war that many view as unjust and dangerous. At the same time, refusing orders could lead to severe punishment. This tension has fueled speculation about possible fractures within the military structure. An army revolution does not necessarily mean tanks rolling through the capital overnight. In many cases, it begins quietly, with refusals to follow orders, passive resistance, or internal disagreements among officers. Even small acts of defiance can signal deeper problems within the chain of command. Lukashenko is well aware of this risk, which is why he has invested heavily in surveillance and counterintelligence within the armed forces. Loyalty checks, political indoctrination, and constant monitoring are used to prevent any organized dissent from forming. Despite these measures, absolute control is difficult to maintain forever. History shows that when regimes rely too heavily on fear, they often fail to notice the moment when fear stops working. When soldiers begin to question whether the system they serve is worth defending, the balance of power can shift rapidly. Another important factor is the role of senior officers. Lower, Rank soldiers may feel frustration, but without support from higher levels, any rebellion is unlikely to succeed. The question, then, is whether there are influential figures within the military who might be willing to challenge Lukashenko's authority. So far, there has been no clear evidence of an organized military plot. However, the absence of public information does not mean the absence of private dissent. Authoritarian systems are often opaque by design, making it difficult to know what is happening behind closed doors. Economic pressure also plays a critical role. Sanctions imposed by Western countries have damaged Belarus's economy, reducing state revenues and increasing dependence on Russia. This has affected military funding, living standards, and long-term stability, all of which influence loyalty. As conditions worsen, the state's ability to buy loyalty through benefits and privileges diminishes. Soldiers who struggle to support their families may become more open to the idea that change is necessary, even if it involves risk. Public perception of the army is another key issue. If citizens begin to see the military not as an instrument of repression, but as a potential force for national renewal, it can create psychological momentum. Conversely, if the army is viewed as just another tool of dictatorship, public support for any military action would be limited. Belarusian opposition groups in exile have tried to appeal to soldiers, urging them to remember their duty to the people rather than to a single leader. These messages are risky to receive or share inside the country, but they still circulate quietly. The possibility of an army revolution also depends on external factors. Russia's influence over Belarus is immense, and Moscow would likely intervene politically, economically, or even militarily to prevent a friendly regime from collapsing. This reality makes any revolutionary scenario far more complex. For many officers, the fear of chaos and foreign intervention may outweigh dissatisfaction with Lukashenko. Stability, even under an unpopular leader, can seem preferable to uncertainty, especially in a region already shaken by war. At the same time, reliance on Russia limits Belarus's sovereignty and future options. Some within the military may resent becoming increasingly dependent on Moscow, seeing it as a loss of national dignity and independence. The idea of Belarus being on the brink reflects this accumulation of pressures rather than a single dramatic event. Political repression, economic decline, war fatigue, and social anger all interact, creating a fragile situation that could change suddenly. It is important to remember that revolutions are rarely predictable. They often appear impossible until the moment they happen. Small incidents can trigger massive consequences when underlying tensions are already high. For Lukashenko, maintaining the loyalty of the army is a constant priority. He frequently appears in military settings, delivers speeches emphasizing unity and external threats, and portrays himself as the sole protector of the nation. This narrative frames any dissent as betrayal not just of the government but of the country itself. Such framing is powerful, but it also deepens divisions between the state and society. If an army revolution were to occur, it would fundamentally reshape Belarus's future. It could open the door to democratic reforms, new elections, and improved relations with the West. It could also lead to instability, power struggles, and external interference. For ordinary Belarusians, the stakes are incredibly high. Many desire change but fear the cost of achieving it. Memories of violence, arrests, and repression are still fresh, making caution a rational response. The question, then, is not only whether the army might turn against Lukashenko, but whether society and the military could move together toward a shared vision of the future. Without unity, any attempt at change would be fragile. At present, Belarus exists in a tense waiting period. Nothing dramatic may happen tomorrow or next month, but the forces shaping the country continue to evolve. Each decision, each crisis, and each act of resistance adds another layer to the situation. The concept of an army revolution captures global attention because it represents one of the few scenarios capable of breaking a deeply entrenched authoritarian system. Whether that scenario becomes reality remains uncertain. What is clear is that Belarus is not as stable as it once appeared. Beneath the surface of controlled media and official speeches lies a society grappling with profound questions about identity, freedom, and the future. As long as these questions remain unanswered, the possibility of sudden change will continue to loom. The army, as a central institution of the state, sits at the heart of this uncertainty. Belarus on the brink is not just a dramatic phrase, it reflects a real sense of suspension between past and future. Whether that future is shaped by gradual reform, continued repression, or a dramatic rupture involving the military is something only time will reveal. For now, the world watches closely, knowing that even in the most tightly controlled systems, history has a way of surprising everyone.